I was never the favorite child. I knew it, even before I could name the feeling. It wasn't the sort of knowledge that came from a single event or cruel statement. It was a quiet realization that settled in, piece by piece over the years. My parents weren't unkind to me, they just cared more loudly for my sister Sana. She was the golden one, the daughter who made them proud, who knew how to laugh at their jokes, who fit neatly into their expectations. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, too observant, too careful, too different. Growing up, our differences showed in small, almost invisible ways. When I brought home a drawing I had spent days perfecting, they'd smile politely and tell me to clean up the table before dinner. When Sana brought home a mediocre report card, they'd still clap like she'd won a gold medal. It wasn't jealousy that burned in me, it was confusion. I wanted to understand why love could be distributed so unevenly under the same roof. Still, I loved my family. Even with the unfairness, I tried to believe that one day things would balance out. Maybe when I grew older, or got a good job, or made them proud in some way. Maybe then they'd look at me and see more than the quiet, practical daughter who always did the right thing but never shined. After university, I didn't take the easy route. I didn't have anyone pulling strings for me, so I worked hard, first as an assistant in a small marketing agency, then later as a freelancer. I wasn't rich, but I managed to live decently. Sana, meanwhile, married well. Her husband came from money, old family wealth, inherited properties, and the kind of social circle that my parents had always admired from afar. They adored him instantly. I remember watching my mother adjust her scarf nervously before his first visit, like she was meeting royalty. My father, who rarely smiled at anyone's jokes, laughed freely that night. When the engagement happened, they treated it like a royal wedding. I stood beside Sana in all the photos, smiling as expected. She looked stunning, radiant with a happiness that was almost blinding. I was genuinely happy for her. I truly was. But somewhere deep down, a small part of me hoped that someday I'd be celebrated too. Years passed. My life stayed quiet, unremarkable but steady. I was saving up to start something of my own, maybe a small cafe or a creative studio. It wasn't much of a plan yet, but it was mine. Then one day my parents called me to visit. They said they had something important to tell me and Sana. When I arrived, Sana and her husband were already there, sitting comfortably in the living room. My mother looked excited, and my father had that satisfied, serious look he got when he was about to make a big decision. "We've been thinking about the future," he began, looking at both of us. "About dividing what we have fairly. The word caught in my throat. For a brief moment I believed him. I thought maybe, after all these years, they finally saw both of us equally. He continued, "We've decided to give Sana the villa on the north side, the one by the lake. And you—" He paused for a second, glancing at me with a half smile. "You'll get the lot next to the old plaza. It's empty now, but it's officially under your name." The words landed softly, but they cut deep. A luxury villa for Sana, marble floors, a garden, a view of the lake. And for me, an empty parking lot. Literally. I knew the place. Cracked concrete, overgrown grass, stray cats sleeping under abandoned carts. I tried to stay composed. "An empty lot?" I asked gently. My father shrugged, almost amused. "Yes, but look at it this way. Land is land. You can always build something. Or," he chuckled, "if nothing else, you can sleep under the stars." My mother laughed. Sana did too, though she quickly covered her mouth like it wasn't polite to laugh too hard. My chest felt heavy, but I smiled anyway. Not because it was funny, but because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the document they'd given me. My name was there, printed neatly in black ink beneath the title of the property. I thought about how parents often say they want their children to be happy, that they love them equally. But maybe love isn't always about fairness. Maybe it's about comfort. And I simply wasn't their comfort. For days, I avoided calling them. I didn't want to sound ungrateful, and I didn't want pity either. But deep down, I promised myself something. I would do something with that land. I didn't know what yet, but I would make it worth something. I didn't want revenge. Not then, at least. I just wanted peace. and maybe a quiet kind of justice. So I started spending weekends at the site. The first few visits were depressing. The lot was worse than I remembered. A broken fence leaned on one side. A faded sign hung from a post that said no parking, as if mocking me. But I stood there, imagining. One evening, I saw a group of kids on bicycles ride past, laughing as they went. Behind them was a row of small shops, a tailor, a tea stall, a grocery store. It wasn't a rich neighborhood, but it was alive. People walked around. They talked, bought things, greeted each other. That's when an idea began to take shape. What if I turned this space into something people actually needed? Not a house, not a villa, but something useful. I started researching small business models, car washes, food stalls, rental kiosks. The lot wasn't big, but it was located on a busy corner. One day, while drinking tea at a small roadside cafe, I overheard a driver complaining about how hard it was to find safe parking for their delivery vans overnight. That conversation sparked something. Parking space. That's what it could be. A proper, secure, affordable parking area for the local business owners. I used my savings to clean the place up. I hired 2 laborers to clear the weeds, fix the fencing, and level the ground. I painted a simple sign myself. Safe Park. Monthly and daily parking available. It was humble, but honest. The first few months were slow. Some days I barely covered my expenses. I remember sitting on a folding chair under a tin shade, drinking cold tea and wondering if I'd made a mistake. But slowly word spread. Delivery vans started showing up, then private cars. A local bakery rented 3 spots for their delivery trucks. Within a year, the place was running smoothly. I wasn't rich, but I was earning steadily. I built a small office shed and hired a night guard named Akram, an old man who treated the job seriously. We kept records, gave printed receipts, and made sure everything was clean and safe. People started trusting us. That was the first time I felt truly proud. Not because someone gave me something, but because I built it myself. Then one afternoon, my parents came to visit unannounced. I still remember the way my father's face changed when he saw the place. Cars parked neatly in rows, a small gatehouse, a security sign, and my little desk under the shade. My mother looked around in surprise. "You did all this?" she asked, almost in disbelief. I smiled. "Yes, it's doing quite well now." They nodded, walked around, asked a few polite questions. My father didn't say much, but I could see the calculations forming behind his eyes. Later, when I handed them tea, he said lightly, "You know, this land was quite a gift. We had no idea it would become something so profitable." I simply nodded. That evening, after they left, I felt something shift. I didn't know it yet, but that visit marked the beginning of another storm, one that would test not only my patience, but my sense of justice. It started a few weeks later, when Sana called me. Her voice was overly casual, the way people sound when they're trying to hide an agenda. "Hey, so, Mom and Dad were talking about your parking business. It sounds like it's doing really well." "It's steady," I said carefully. "Not huge, but it's growing." "That's great. You've always been so smart with money." She paused. "You know, Dad mentioned something, that maybe since the land originally came from them, you could, share a bit of the income, just as appreciation." I went silent for a moment. My heartbeat slowed. I had expected something like this, but still, hearing it aloud was like a slap. I said quietly, "Appreciation?" "Sana, they gave me an empty lot. I invested my savings, my time, my work. I built this." I know, she rushed in. "But they just feel, since it's family property, maybe some part of it should stay within the family. Don't take it the wrong way." I didn't argue. I simply said I'd think about it and ended the call. But that night, lying in bed, I realized something important. They hadn't given me that land as a gift. They'd given it as an afterthought. A joke, a way to make me feel grateful for scraps. And now that I'd turned those scraps into something valuable, they wanted it back. That's when revenge, quiet, patient, calm revenge, began to take root. Not the dramatic kind with yelling or fights, but the kind that grows in silence, fueled by dignity. I promised myself I wouldn't let them take what I built. But I also wouldn't fight them in anger. I'd handle it differently, calmly, intelligently, the way they'd never expect. And so began the second chapter of my story, where the quiet daughter they'd overlooked all her life finally learned to stand up, not by shouting, but by succeeding. I didn't react immediately. I've learned over time that silence can be far more powerful than argument. When people expect resistance and don't get it, they grow uneasy, and uneasiness makes them reveal their true motives faster than anger ever could. For the next few days, I kept to myself. I went to the lot, checked receipts, greeted customers, and watched the steady flow of vehicles come and go. Each car felt like quiet proof that I had done something right. Proof that I didn't need anyone's permission to succeed. But my peace didn't last long. The following weekend, my father called me directly. His tone was pleasant, almost too pleasant. "Beta," he began, "I was thinking, maybe we should formalize things about that property. You know, make sure everything is legally secure." It was ironic. When they handed me the empty plot, there had been no talk of paperwork beyond the basic transfer. But now, suddenly they wanted to formalize. I agreed to meet, though I knew it wasn't really a discussion. It was a test. At the meeting, my parents and Sana sat across from me in the same living room where they'd once laughed about sleeping under the stars. The same laughter still echoed in my memory. My father spoke first. "We're happy to see you doing well." "Really, we are. But, it's still family land. It wouldn't be right for one person to take all the benefit." I looked at him quietly. "When you gave it to me, you said it was mine." Yes, he said quickly, waving his hand. "Of course, but you know how families are. Everything stays within. Maybe you could give a small percentage, 10% of your earnings, to the family fund. It would help with household expenses. It's just symbolic." Sana nodded in agreement, though her eyes said something else. It wasn't about symbolism. It was about control. I replied gently, "I don't have a problem supporting the family if there's a real need. But if this is about ownership, then we should be honest about that." My father's smile faded. "Don't take it that way. We're just saying, we gave you the land. Surely you can show a little gratitude." That word, gratitude, stung more than I expected. It was always their favorite word when it came to me. Gratitude for small things, gratitude for being tolerated, gratitude for leftovers. I stood up slowly, keeping my voice even. "I am grateful, but I worked for this. Every brick, every painted line, every customer, that wasn't luck. That was effort, and I won't share it out of guilt." My mother sighed softly, as if I were being dramatic. "You're becoming stubborn, like those people who forget their roots." I smiled faintly. "No, Ami, I'm remembering them too well." The conversation ended there, but from that day onward, the distance between us grew wider. Calls became colder, shorter. I didn't chase their approval anymore, and that made them uncomfortable. Then one morning, I received a letter. It was an official-looking envelope, my father's handwriting on the front. Inside was a notice, a claim of co-ownership. They were trying to reclaim the property under family rights, suggesting that the land had only been loaned to me for use, not given. For a few minutes, I couldn't even breathe. My hands shook as I read and reread the lines. They were actually trying to take it legally. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about pride, theirs and mine. I took a long walk that evening. The air was cool, and I could smell the faint scent of roasted corn from a nearby vendor. I thought about how easily family can turn into strangers when pride gets involved. I had two options: fight them with anger or outsmart them with patience. I chose patience. The next day, I went to see a lawyer. She was a sharp, kind woman named Samina, someone who didn't use complicated words to sound important. I explained everything: the gift, the registry, the improvements I had made, the letter I'd received. She listened quietly, taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "If they transferred it legally, it's yours. But people often rely on emotional pressure when they have no legal ground. They'll try to wear you down. I nodded. They already started. She smiled faintly. Then let's give them something to think about. Samina helped me gather every receipt, every photograph, every document showing I'd invested in developing the land. We even pulled out tax records proving I had declared income from the property under my own name. Piece by piece, we built a wall of quiet evidence. A few weeks later, my father invited me again. This time, not to talk, but to scold. "You got lawyers involved?" he said sharply. "You think this is how you treat your parents?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not fighting you, Abu. I'm protecting what's mine. You taught me to be responsible, remember?" He glared, then turned away. "Fine. If that's how you want it, we'll see what happens." And they did try. Sana's husband, who had a few connections in local offices, started whispering about how I was cheating the family. Rumors spread quietly in our community, that I had turned greedy, that I was disrespectful, that money had made me arrogant. It hurt, of course it did. But I didn't retaliate. I showed up every day at the parking lot, worked as usual, greeted people with calm confidence. The regulars respected me. They had seen my journey. They knew the truth without needing to hear it. A few months later, I expanded the business. I built a small service center next to the lot. Oil changes, tire checks, basic repairs. I partnered with a young mechanic named Haroon, who was skilled but struggling to find stable work. We shared profits fairly, and soon, the place was busier than ever. The irony wasn't lost on me. The land they once mocked had now become more profitable than Sana's villa, which stood mostly empty since her husband often traveled abroad. Then, one fine morning, a black car pulled into my lot. My father stepped out, wearing the same look he used to wear when inspecting things that belonged to him. I came out of the office to greet him. He didn't waste time. "You've built quite a place," he said. "It's impressive." "Thank you," I replied evenly. He looked around, his tone shifting. "Maybe we made mistakes before, but you can't just cut us off. This is family." I knew what he wanted, not reconciliation, but negotiation. I stayed calm. "You're always welcome to visit. But this," I gestured around, "belongs to me. Legally and morally," he frowned. "You'll regret this coldness someday." "Maybe," I said softly. "But I'd regret more if I kept letting others take credit for my effort." He left without another word. After that, the legal notice quietly disappeared. Samina suspected they realized they had no case, but even though the legal battle was over, the emotional one lingered. Sana stopped calling entirely. My mother sent me short, awkward messages on Eid. It wasn't the warm family I once knew, but at least I finally felt free from their approval. Freedom, however, doesn't come without loneliness. There were nights I sat in my little office long after closing time, listening to the city hum around me. Sometimes I missed the idea of a family. Not mine as it was, but the one I used to imagine. Still, I told myself that peace earned through honesty is better than love built on guilt. As the years went by, my business grew. We added CCTV cameras, an online booking system, even a small cafe corner for drivers waiting during service. What was once an empty parking lot had turned into a modest but thriving enterprise. Then something unexpected happened. A journalist who wrote about small businesses featured my story in a local paper. The headline read, "From Empty Lot to Local Landmark, a woman's journey of turning neglect into opportunity." The article spread online. I received messages from young people who said my story inspired them, especially women who had been told they'd never amount to much. That meant more to me than any apology could. My parents saw the article too. My mother called me after almost a year of silence. Her voice trembled slightly. "I read about you. You've done very well." "Thank you," I said softly. She hesitated. "Your father isn't saying it, but he's proud too." I smiled faintly. "That's good to know." We spoke for a while, cautiously, politely, like distant relatives trying to remember how to be close. I didn't bring up the past. I didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. Sana didn't call, but I heard from someone that she had rented out the villa to pay off debts from her husband's failed business. Life has its own way of balancing the scales. Still, I didn't gloat. My revenge had never been about making them suffer. It was about showing quietly and unmistakably that I was never the lesser one. That dignity, once claimed, cannot be taken back. And when I walked across my parking lot in the evenings, the sound of engines, laughter from drivers, the smell of tea brewing, I felt something that money could never buy. Calm. A calm born not of victory, but of closure. But the story wasn't quite over yet. Because as time went on, my parents came back again, not to fight, but with another request. And this time, I would have to decide what forgiveness really means, and how far calm revenge can go before it turns into simple compassion. That was the beginning of the final chapter. It had been almost 3 years since that quiet war ended. The kind fought not with shouting or courts, but with silence and time. I had built something stable, something meaningful. Safe Park had expanded into 2 more lots in nearby neighborhoods, each one run by honest people I trained myself. The name had started to mean something. People trusted it. Life had settled into a calm rhythm. Early mornings, soft tea breaks, balancing books by night. Some evenings I sat on the roof of the office shed, looking at the small world I had created. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For someone who once had nothing but an empty lot and a handful of bruised hopes, that was enough. Then, one evening in winter, I received a call I hadn't expected. It was my mother. Her voice sounded thin, as if it had to travel a long distance to reach me. "Beta," she said, "can you come home? It's about your father." My heart dropped a little. I didn't ask questions, I just said I'd come. When I reached, I saw my father sitting on the veranda, wrapped in a shawl. He looked smaller somehow, the way strong men do when time humbles them. His hair had turned fully gray, and his hands trembled slightly as he tried to pour tea. I greeted him softly. "Assalamu alaikum, Abu." He looked up, surprised but relieved. "Wa alaikum salam. You came." "Of course," I said. We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that holds years of unsaid things. Then he cleared his throat. "Business is good?" "It's steady," I said. "Alhamdulillah," he nodded. "I see your signboard sometimes. You've done well." I waited for what would come next. It did, slowly, awkwardly. "Your sister, she's having some difficulties. Her husband left for Dubai months ago. There were some investments that went bad. She might lose the villa." I didn't say anything. The irony was too sharp to put into words. He continued, "Your mother and I are trying to help, but our savings aren't what they used to be. The pension barely covers medicines. And Sana, she's not coping well." I listened quietly. He wasn't asking yet, but the request was hanging there, unspoken, like mist before rain. Finally, he sighed. "We were wondering if you could lend some support, just until she gets back on her feet." There it was. The same family that once mocked me for sleeping under the stars now needed shelter under my roof. Part of me wanted to say no, not out of cruelty, but from exhaustion. I had built everything without them. I had carried their coldness, their judgment, their indifference. I owed them nothing. But another part of me, the part that had always longed for their warmth, wanted to help. So I asked, calmly, "How much does she need?" He looked at me surprised. "We thought maybe you could talk to your bank." "The villa loan?" I cut in gently. "No, Abu, I'm not taking loans, but I can give her enough to manage a few months. Beyond that, she'll have to make decisions herself." He nodded slowly, ashamed but relieved. "That's generous of you, generous." Another word that used to sting, but this time it didn't. I wasn't giving to earn approval. I was giving because I could, and because it didn't cost my peace. The next day, I met Sana for the first time in years. She looked tired. the kind of tired that sits behind the eyes and doesn't go away with sleep. Her once luxurious villa was half empty, some furniture already sold. The garden, once trimmed and perfect, was wild with weeds. She greeted me awkwardly, unsure whether to hug me or apologize first. I smiled, taking the lead. "It's been a long time." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," I said softly. "Let's just have tea." We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where, years ago, she'd laughed about my parking lot. Now, the laughter had turned into sighs. "After a while," she said quietly, "you were right, you know, about everything. I used to think I had everything figured out. The house, the marriage, the parents' love, but it all feels temporary now." I didn't gloat. I didn't remind her of her words. I just listened. Sometimes silence is the only response that carries dignity. Before leaving, I gave her an envelope. "This should help with your bills and groceries. It's not charity. Think of it as a small bridge until you find your next step." She took it hesitantly. "I don't deserve this after how we treated you." I smiled. "Maybe not, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the person I used to be, the one who needed kindness and didn't get it." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," I nodded. "That's enough." Driving back that day, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not victory, not satisfaction, but release. It was as if I'd finally put down a heavy bag I'd been carrying for years. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always mean making others suffer. Sometimes it means reaching a point where their opinion no longer has the power to hurt you. A few months passed. Sana started working part-time at a small event firm. My father's health worsened, and my mother moved in with her to help. I visited occasionally, not often, but enough to show I cared. The distance between us had softened, though it would never fully disappear. Some cracks are too deep to fill. One day, when I visited my father at the clinic, he held my hand with surprising strength. "You proved me wrong," he said, his voice weak but steady. "All those years I thought you were too quiet to survive this world. But you were the only one who truly learned how to live." I smiled faintly. "You gave me a good lesson, Abu. You just didn't know it then." He chuckled softly, then coughed. "I was hard on you, maybe because you reminded me of myself. Stubborn, serious, always wanting fairness. I didn't know how to love that part of you." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever hear, and somehow it was enough. After he passed away that winter, I felt no bitterness, only a quiet gratitude that we'd found some peace before the end. I helped with the arrangements, stood beside my mother, and watched Sana cry with genuine sorrow. For once, the three of us were just people, not roles trapped in old hierarchies. Time went on. Life as it does kept moving forward. I continued growing the business, mentoring young women who wanted to start their own ventures. Sometimes I'd tell them a simple truth. Don't chase fairness. Build your own version of it. Years later, when the government announced plans to redevelop the area around my first parking lot, I was offered a handsome price for the land. Developers wanted to build a mall. The same cracked ground where I once stood, mocked for having nothing, was now worth more than Sana's villa ever was. I sold it, but not out of greed. I sold it because I was ready to let it go. That piece of land had already served its purpose. It had taught me strength, patience, and the quiet art of self-worth. With part of the money, I opened a vocational training center nearby, a small, sunlit place where women could learn bookkeeping, basic mechanics, and small business management. I named it Naira, the new path. During the opening ceremony, my mother attended. She sat in the front row, dressed simply, her hands trembling as she held the program pamphlet. When I went up to speak, she was the first to clap. Afterward, she hugged me tightly, something she hadn't done since I was a child. "Your father would have been proud," she whispered. I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. That evening, after everyone left, I stood outside the center, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. The world was quiet. Somewhere nearby, a call to prayer echoed softly. And for the first time, I felt completely at peace, not because I had won, but because I had forgiven. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about payback. Sometimes it's about transformation, turning pain into purpose, neglect into strength, silence into wisdom. People often think calm revenge means coldness, but that's not true. It means understanding that the best answer to cruelty is self-respect, that you don't need to destroy others to prove your worth. You just need to stop letting them define it. When I got home that night, I looked through some old photographs, the ones from the day my parents divided the inheritance. There was my father, smiling proudly at Sana, and me standing a little behind, smiling politely. I remembered the ache I'd felt that day. But now I smiled for real. I whispered to that younger version of myself, "You did it. You turned their insult into your strength. You found peace, not through revenge, but through becoming someone they couldn't ignore." And that to me was the real ending. Not dramatic, not loud, just calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm when the air feels new again. Before turning off the light, I wrote one line in my notebook, a habit I'd picked up over the years. They gave me nothing. I built everything. And now I owe no one, not even anger. That's how I sleep now, under the same stars they once joked about. But this time, I'm not beneath them out of pity. I'm under them by choice, free, content, and unafraid. If you've stayed with me till the end of this story, thank you. If my journey spoke to you, even in a small way, then maybe it was worth telling. Remember, revenge doesn't have to be cruel or loud. Sometimes, the calmest revenge is simply becoming the person they thought you never could. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge, where I share more true-to-life tales of quiet strength, resilience, and poetic justice. Your support helps keep these stories alive, one calm revenge at a time.